Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching us on YouTube, we're glad to have you. I'm your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Burtram. And today with us, we have returning back to the show, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. She's the Congresswoman who represents Virginia's 4th Congressional District, which happens to be the home of Faithful Politics. And she sits on the House Armed Services Committee and the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. So welcome back to the show,
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yes, good to have you back. I guess before we get started, I got to get some important questions out of the way. Halloween's coming up. Do you already have a Halloween costume in mind? Because I was looking back on some of the old pictures, and you've been like Black Widow, Queen, and Elsa, maybe. Not really quite sure what. Yeah. So what's it going to be this year?
I can't tell you. So as you probably know, I do a giant harvest festival every year on Halloween, and I do a countdown. And if people want to know what I'm going to be every year, they've got to come to Harvest Festival to find out. So I can't. I will give you a hint, though. My daughter and I will be a mother-daughter duo.
Nice.
That's as much as I can tell you right now. But we really put up.
Okay. That's good. I was wondering what I was going to dress up as this year, because my wife is going to be dressing up as like Elphaba from the Wizard of Oz. And she has like this green lipstick, and was debating whether or not to do the full green paint. And I told her, well, if you're going to dress up as Elphaba, maybe I'll dress up like, I don't know, Diana Ross from The Wiz, or like the Scarecrow, Michael Jackson's role.
Yes, you could do the Scarecrow.
Actually, have you seen Wicked?
I have seen Wicked, yeah.
So, I mean, you could be Fiyero, who becomes the Scarecrow, who is Elphaba's love interest.
Interesting.
Ah, that's a good idea.
I'm gonna write that one down, actually, because
I was thinking you should have a contest like of the worst things you've been called as by your like opponents or by like crazy people on the internet, and you could see which one of those things should you dress up as. Of course, appropriately. Yeah. And all Congress should do that. And then we can start maybe seeing how these words really matter. Huh?
But that gives them more power than I want to give them. So
that's true.
Yeah,
that's
true that. Well, so since the last time we spoke, maybe you can kind of start us off by talking to our audience about all the wonderful things you've been doing for the 4th District over the past year.
Well, I'll put it in kind of 3 buckets. One, which is my favorite part of the job, is the casework. Anybody who has a problem with a federal agency can call my office, and my excellent staff can help solve their problem. And so through the casework that we've done, we have brought back over $3 million to constituents of their money, whether it's, tax refunds or incorrect taxes, to veterans benefits, to Social Security benefits. So I think just helping people navigate issues with the federal government is probably my favorite part of the job. 2 is what we call community project funding. So as part of the annual appropriations process, every member of Congress can request up to 15 projects for their district, and all of the projects that I requested in the 24 cycle were granted, and so I brought back $15 million. Everything from water improvement projects in Colonial Heights and the southern part of the district, to broadband projects in Henrico, to affordable housing for survivors of domestic violence, helping the city of Richmond with the combined sewage overflow problem, trying to fix that. So that's my second favorite part of the job, because it shows how when the federal government works together with our local and nonprofit partners, we can solve problems. And then legislatively, through the National Defense Authorization Act, I was able to get a number of amendments helping deal with quality of life issues for our service members, particularly around mental health services. I also got, Tim Kaine gets all the credit, but I had the House version of a bill that would prohibit any president from
Nice.
unilaterally withdrawing the United States from NATO. He would have to have, or she would have to have a congressional approval. And then through the NASA Authorization Act, I was able to get some legislation passed that would, and this was one my son was pretty excited about, would have NASA work to establish a standard celestial time, which you're probably wondering, why do we need that? But as we start,
Nice.
as we start traveling back to the moon and beyond to Mars, we need to have a standard time that is the same for everybody. And you probably didn't know, on the moon, time is about 58 milliseconds different than here on Earth. So we got to make sure that everybody's using the same time,
Dang.
because that precision could, in a catastrophe or in an accident, be the difference between life and death. So those are a few of the things that I've been able to accomplish as a freshman member in the minority party.
Wait, just
That's awesome.
real fast. So the standard celestial time, that's fascinating to me, because like I've always, I mean, as a big like Trekkie Star
Yep.
Wars like person, I've always wondered, how do people end up like in meetings on time? Like what time are they using? Because you're right, like time works differently depending on like
We
how a
understand your
planet
celestial
rotates. I
time.
think.
So it's the first step. Star dates,
Yeah,
I
like
guess.
the Klingon and the Vulcan and the human, like, how do they get there at the meeting at the exact right time? That is a great question I've never thought to ask or even ponder. So that's so good. I love that. You know, I want to dig into some of the advocacy that you've had, and the things that have been very important for you in terms of some of your work and the things that you've talked about, changes you feel like still need to be made and want to make in our country through legislation. I wanted to ask you a question about voting rights advocacy. You know, you were very adamant about including the SAVE Act in the most recent
Not including him.
not including, excluding, I apologize, excluding the SAVE Act in the most recent continuing resolution. What kind of talk to us a little bit about that for those ignorant of what that even is, and how does that connect to the broader sense of federal voting rights and its evolving status right now in
Yeah.
America?
So first, let me put that in context. Voting rights is very personal to me, because, you know, in my own family, there's been a history of having to overcome barriers to voting. So my great grandfather, in 1901, had to take a literacy test and find 3 white men to vouch for his character just to be able to register to vote. And when he got the
Mm.
questions right, because he was on a list of people not to register, because he was a community leader in the Black community, when he got the questions right, the registrar said, and this is the only time you'll ever hear me use this word, is in a direct quote, but the registrar turned to his assistant and said, "I need more questions because this nigger got them all right." My
Dang.
grandfather and my father paid poll taxes, and matter of fact, I took my oath of office on the Bible that my dad kept his poll tax receipt in. So it's personal to me, but it's also, you know, in a government by, of, and for the people, only the people who get to participate have their perspectives heard and therefore have their needs met. So, and as a history nerd, you know, from day one in this country, there's been voter suppression, and the struggle has been, how do we ensure that anyone other than white land-owning men can vote? Because they were the first ones who were allowed to vote, and for a long time the only ones. So the SAVE Act, what that is a bill that Speaker Johnson really pushed, that would require anyone to prove their citizenship before they could vote. And number one, it's unnecessary. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. It's punishable by up to 5 years in prison if you do it in a federal election. There's no evidence of widespread issues of non-citizens voting or even trying to vote. But more importantly, it puts barriers in the way of citizens voting, because when I looked at that bill and really started asking questions about it, your driver's license wouldn't count. If you're a student or you work at a university, that ID wouldn't count. The only form of proof you could give costs money, like a passport or a copy of your birth certificate with other things. And to me, that was a modern day poll tax that would result in American citizens having barriers put in the way for some that are not overcomable easily. And I'm not going to do anything that's going to put more barriers in the way of people voting. We need to be removing barriers.
Yeah, that's really well said. And thankfully we were able to get the CR passed and there wasn't a shutdown, although I suppose maybe in that same vein, kind of as a follow-up question, what concerns would you have with, I forgot, was it December 5th or December 20th, when you all meet again to kind of discuss the budget? So like if let's say Kamala Harris wins, and we still have a Republican Congress, like is that going to affect anything, especially with regards to certifications of elections and all that other kind of stuff?
A couple of things. So the new Congress will be sworn in on January 3rd. So when we come back to do government funding, it'll be the current Congress that does it, and hopefully we will pass. We got 12 appropriations bills we've got to pass. Hopefully we will have done that with no drama. Yeah. Then so it'll be the new Congress that certifies the election on January 6th. And I have concerns that if it is a Republican majority, if Mike Johnson is the speaker again, he was one of the legal architects behind the challenging of vote certification in 2020 of the 2020 election, and there are some members of the Republican caucus who still won't admit that Joe Biden won the election in 2020 despite no evidence of election fraud then. So I do have some concerns. If they're in the majority, will they certify the election? And a lot of Republican candidates, when asked, won't say whether they will certify the election or not. Whereas I no matter who wins, I'm going to vote to certify the election absent, widespread evidence of an issue. And normally that will be flagged well in advance. And our elections are very secure. It is very hard to commit voter fraud in this country. And so I don't expect there to be any real evidence of voter fraud, no matter who wins the election. So I'm going to vote to certify the winner, period. But there are a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who have not pledged to do the same. And that does concern me.
Yeah, I want to ask you about climate change. I know it's an area that you're passionate about, and especially given the events of Hurricane Helene. We have seen just this level of devastation that I don't think anybody could have predicted. And but I want to ask you kind of about climate change, sort of through a different lens that you might have some unique insight on. So, being that you sit on the Armed Services Committee, is climate change an issue from a readiness perspective for our military?
Absolutely. And I actually made that point in a committee meeting when one of my landlocked Republican colleagues from, I think, Indiana was attacking the Secretary of the Navy asking, like, why do you say that climate change is a primary concern? Shouldn't it be operations? And I asked a series of questions, sort of connecting those dots. So and I'll give you an example. The largest naval station in the Western Hemisphere, if not the world, is in Norfolk. Norfolk is one of the most vulnerable cities to rising sea level. There's a road that goes right down the middle of the naval station. And when I visited and I asked the commanding officer, what keeps you up at night? One of the things she said is, with these rising, with an increase in the number of these major storms, or even just major rain, when there's a lot of rain, that road floods and I can't get from one side of the base to the other. It also, rising sea level has an impact on our ships. Rising temperatures has an impact on our service members, particularly in parts of the world where they're stationed that are over 100 degrees. And rising sea level and rising temperature is leading to changes in food supply, killing of crops, making more land inhabitable that eventually will have national security implications. I would argue already is having national security implications. So there is a direct relationship between climate change and operational readiness and the ability of our service members to survive in certain climates. And so I think we really need to pay attention to that. But oh, by the way, the military has traditionally been one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases and energy inefficiency. So we can both address, how do we make the military more energy efficient? How do we make sure that they are having less of a negative environmental impact on the communities where they're based, whether it's pollution or greenhouse gases? And how can we make sure that our service members remain healthy and ready to deploy if necessary?
Yeah, that's those are all great points. I appreciate you bringing them up. I would love to talk with you about criminal justice reform. Are there any aspects of Virginia's criminal justice system that you feel like need reformed? And on the other side, are there aspects of Virginia's criminal justice system, so that's where we are, right, that you would like to see replicated or seen on a federal level? And even maybe connecting that to overall what needs to change in our criminal justice system.
I think there's three major areas, sort of on the prevention and response. So I've done a lot of work breaking the school to prison pipeline. I think since we were kids, I think we're all roughly the same age, Gen X. Since we were kids, there are things that we did that we would have probably been, punished for, but now it's criminalized. And so there were between the disorderly conduct statutes and a couple of other, there were kids that were being referred to law enforcement, which is basically an arrest, for like singing a rap song on a bus or getting in arguments, kicking trash cans and things like that. And so I think rather than treating children like many adults, using a discipline process and not the criminal justice system to correct behavior, and getting back to that, we did a lot of work at the state level that I would like to see replicated at the federal level. Two, we have done a lot around addressing the root causes of gun violence in Virginia I worked with Delegate Marcia Price to create a fund that would invest in community-based organizations addressing the root causes of root crime in communities, because it's different. Gun violence in Richmond is different than gun violence in Norfolk or Roanoke. I'd like to see more of that done at the federal level, because you can't arrest your way out of gun violence. You have to get at the root causes of it. And for many people, things that we used to resolve with the fist, kids now are resolving with a gun. Third, we've got to restore trust between law enforcement and communities, which was fraying before the murder of George Floyd. But with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, no-knock warrants are dangerous. They put law enforcement officers in danger. We banned them here in Virginia. I'd like to see them banned at the federal level. So those are a few of the things that we've done here that I'd like to see replicated. But the bottom line is we've got to get back to community-based policing where there was trust between the community and law enforcement and not this adversarial situation. I hear from some communities here in Richmond, when the police show up to investigate or respond to a crime, they treat everybody like a suspect rather than as a potential victim or witness. And so just doing more to restore that trust is critically important, and there are a wide variety of ways we can do that. But I've mentioned a couple.
So on the issue of gun violence, so I live in the same county as Trump's campaign manager, Chris LaSavita, Chesterfield County, right? And my son, and I know that you have kids too, so you could probably relate. Mentioned something to me the other day after their school had a lockdown drill or something like that. He's fifth grade, and he told me, he's like, "Daddy, I keep hearing that when I go to middle school or to high school, the lockdown drills are actually going to be real. And what we do, in elementary school is just kind of like practice." And it just broke my heart. I mean, really, like, to have your 10-year-old tell you this, and it's just as a matter of fact, like part of life. I mean, so like what can schools do to, I don't know, not scar our kids? I mean, like on one side, I have to kind of like, I try to balance to make sure that, okay, am I just being too much of a helicopter parent? Like, am I trying to protect my kid too much? I mean, because when I was his age, like I watched the space shuttle explode,
Yeah.
So
This is one of the areas that most frustrates and breaks my heart, because, and when I watched the vice presidential debate and the conversation between Tim Walz and JD Vance on this very issue, the answer cannot be, let's turn our schools into fortresses. Because I don't think, and you touched on it, people do not fully appreciate the trauma that gun violence or the threat of gun violence puts our kids through. It's not just the active shooter drills. I mean, my son, about 2 weeks after I took my oath of office, one of his classmates killed himself accidentally with a gun that he was using as a prop to shoot a video. Why wasn't that gun locked and put in a safe when they, like, that's one area where we can do more to ensure we are keeping guns out of the hands of children or to kill themselves accidentally. I already talked about addressing the root causes of gun crime, because then he had, for the third year in a row, school ended early for him. First with COVID, then he got COVID. And then there was the shooting at the graduation that ended school early, because we're not addressing the underlying root causes of gun violence. I think we need to bring back I forgot the name of it, but the automatic weapons ban. There are weapons of war that were never designed to be in civilian hands that now can be used too quickly to kill people. And
assault weapons banning.
Thank you.
Right.
And I think it's not, I mean, yes, the number of lives lost to gun violence is tragic. And the families of those that are killed by gun violence. But we've also got to think about the impact that this is one reason why our children are facing higher levels of anxiety and mental health issues, because they're afraid every time they leave the house that they could be next, that they could be killed. My son's one of them. And every time there's not just a mass shooting, but like, you know, when a 9-year-old is killed in a park, caught in the crossfire, I've got to sit down with my son and talk about, I don't know if you're next, but I'm doing everything within my power to make sure that that doesn't happen. But that is an anxiety he lives with every single day that we didn't have to as kids.
You know, I do have a follow-up question on the assault weapons ban, and this has sort of been a point of debate within my house, anyways, because like my wife is purely in the guns are bad sort of camp. She was raised Mennonite. I'm a former infantry guy, so like I wouldn't say I have this like, you know, fetish with guns, but I like shooting guns. I have a couple guns myself.
You like guns, Will.
Yeah,
Just
one
be honest.
one
like
one you
guns.
might even, you know, consider an assault rifle, and I've made it clear to a lot of people that if I knew without a shadow of a doubt that me giving up my assault rifle would save lives, like I'd do it in a heartbeat. Wouldn't have any issues with it, assuming I get like fair market value for my because it was expensive. But you know, I guess like how can
Well, okay. I'm
like
anticipating.
go ahead. I'll
There
let you
was an
respond.
assault weapons ban put in place under President Clinton. It did save lives. The numbers bear it out. The statistics bear it out. And when it expired, the number of mass shootings went up. The number of and mass shootings in particular is what I'm concerned about with the assault weapons. And when there is an assault weapons ban, it's not let's go confiscate all of the guns that are on the street. That's a different conversation. It's about no more manufacturing and selling of these guns to the civilian population. These are guns that were created for warfare. Why do you need that for sport purposes or for hunting? Or even if, you know, if you do, then that's a separate conversation that we need to have. But they do save lives. The proof is that we had one for at least 20 years and the number of mass shootings went down. And when it expired, the number of mass shootings went up. And a mass shooting is 4 or more. So they work. I don't understand the debate here, honestly. I don't understand when you know, every other thing that causes mass deaths, there's this hysteria around, well, we got to do something to ban it. Guns kill people. There are laws in place that say certain people should not have a gun. They get them anyway. There are things we can do to help curb that. There are things that we can do to ensure if you aren't supposed to have a gun and you have one and that gun is used to kill somebody, there are consequences. And I don't understand when the majority of the American people support an assault weapons ban, why we can't get it passed. I don't get it.
I think this is just my own, you know, sort of thoughts on it, is that I think the definition for mass shooting, mass killing probably needs to be defined a little bit better. Cause like, so I follow two accounts online, like the mass shooting, I think it's mass shooting archive, and then like the gun violence archive, I think. But they track different things. So like I get a notification on my phone every time there's been a mass shooting in the country, and sadly, like I get a notification a couple times a day, right? And it's like one person might die, but 3 other people were shot, but they'll live. So like kind of, you know, according to, I don't know if it's a DOJ or FBI's definition, it's like if 4 or more people have been shot, I don't think it clarifies it as being killed or whatever like that. So it seems like with an assault rifle, because you can get, you know, 30 round, 100 round magazine or whatever, which seems kind of ridiculous, but like, you know, these large capacity magazines can kill a lot of people. So it's almost like there should be like mass shooting index, and then there should be like a mass killing index. And the assault weapons ban would actually, you know, curb the mass killing, not necessarily the mass shootings, if that makes sense.
Well, I hear you. But whether you're killed or you're maimed with an assault rifle, your life is changed forever.
Oh yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think, I don't see why AR-15s need to be in civilian hands. I really don't. I just don't.
I mean, I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go.
Okay. I'm just interested in this because one, I have a lot of sympathy for what you're saying. I'm token Republican here on the show or whatever, but and I am pro gun ownership. I have a shotgun. Will, for being such a liberal, is way more heavily armed than I am, and I love that. It's like my one thing I can hold against him, and I could say, "Well, no, I'm just kidding." I actually love that, but I think that one of the ways, or okay, I think people should read the Washington Post article that they put out on AR-15s and they put this article out that basically talked about the damage it does versus other bullets because of how high velocity they go. Like, just, it gives you a visual that I think no matter what side of the debate you're coming down on, look at what's actually happening. I mean, like you said, to your point, like when someone gets hit by an AR-15 bullet, their leg is gone. I mean, it absolutely maims them. And it's not like a 22, where someone can get hit and recover easily. And I'm not saying that, obviously it's depending on where you can get hit, and no one should get shot. But what I'm saying is that it is so visceral when you actually like look at, hey, what is this doing? And you wouldn't use those for hunting because they absolutely decimate, they destroy the animal. So no one's really using those, I don't think, for hunting as much. Maybe some people are. I can't say, but that's not the majority. I would love for you to respond to this idea that, when I talk to my friends who have, they've collected AR-15s, 1,000 round of ammunition, and I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? They're like, I need the ability to protect myself and my family. I don't trust our government to do it. I don't trust the law enforcement to really do it. And if things go crazy, I want to be able to have my own protection against whatever it is. Now, I'm not saying that's the right way to view it. I'm not endorsing that view at this point. But what I'm saying is it's not like as much, oh, yeah, I want this for hunting. No, people know what it's there for, and they're using it and they're getting it for protection. The people I know. I don't know what, and we can move on from the gun control issues, but I would love to get your response if you have one.
I mean, I guess I don't understand why an AR-15 is necessary for that. AR-15s were created as weapons of war to use to kill people offensively. There are many different types of guns that you could use for defense purposes. I don't understand that, and I'm willing to have that conversation. I don't understand why you need an AR-15 to protect your family.
That's fair.
Kind of just to stay in the same vein, not gun control. We can get off that subject, but I do want to talk about just education within Virginia, and I don't know if other schools are having the same issue, but we went to a teacher thing recently at our son's school, and the principal made a point to say, like, we're getting pretty overcrowded. They had to build a bunch of these trailers and stuff, which is funny because I went to school in California, and like I was a trailer child, a trailer student, like with great pride, as a matter of fact, but like, our schools are having to build more and more of these trailers to accommodate like a growing population. And I was curious if you had any thoughts on, like how we can fix our public schools kind of at the county or district level to make sure our kids are getting taught right.
Mean, that's more of a school infrastructure issue. And I think, had I been in Congress at the time when they were debating the the Infrastructure Act, I would have pushed very hard for federal funding for school infrastructure. I chaired a commission here at the state legislature looking at the conditions of our schools. In Virginia, over 50% of the schools are over 100 years old. A lot of them are overcrowded, but to build a school is very expensive. If we were to replace every school in Virginia that's over 100 years old, it would be $25 billion. Virginia doesn't have that much money. Chesterfield County doesn't have that much money. Charles City County doesn't have enough money. It's very expensive to renovate or build a new school. And if you look at when a lot of the schools were built, it was in the 30s or the 50s and the 80s when the federal government invested in school infrastructure. And so I think, and we did a lot of work at the state level creating a fund for more state funding. But I think we need to have federal funding for school infrastructure because it's not just overcrowding. It's you've got schools where they can't do state-of-the-art science experiments because the facility was built 100 years ago and doesn't have the capacity for the equipment that you need. Or you've got schools that have to be closed because of mold. And so that's, I know a lot of people don't like, they say government is too big, but the fact is that we put too much on our local governments to pay for that they just don't have the capacity to pay for. And school infrastructure is one of them.
Could school infrastructure still be funded through the federal government if the Department of Education gets abolished?
Probably not. I mean, there's a lot of the purpose of the Department of Education, in part, is to use grant funding to run grant funding programs to K-12 schools and higher education, as well as to enforce the Civil Rights Act in our schools. Oh, by the way, so if you don't have a Department of Education, you don't have anybody enforcing civil rights laws in schools that were segregated and full of discrimination for hundreds of years. So I don't know how you would funnel that money to the localities without a Department of Education to do that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm thinking about the expense of $25 billion to get to replace the schools we already have, right? So that's not increasing our capacity. Right. That's just getting what we have up to kind of modern day standards, 2024, 2025 standards. And that's like a huge mind blowing number. Maybe we could borrow some from Donald Trump, and then maybe we could borrow some from the Defense Department. They might have a few dollars. Like, didn't they they couldn't even find like $13 billion or something like that? Maybe we could figure out how it's, I'm just making that number up. But I remember,
they have
some
had
controversy.
Some trouble
with their accounting. Yes. Yeah, but I'm just thinking about like taxes in general, right? The tax code. But even, and let me just stick with that, the tax code. Because And again, this is very amateur, very ignorant. That's me. Like, I don't know enough about it to make any kind of authoritative statement, so I'm not. But I'm just wondering, like, is there a way to funnel some of the taxes, the enormous amount of taxes going to the federal government and get some more of that, like change the tax code so that more taxes could go on the local level? And I would love for you to, respond to that and then talk about the tax code in general and what you think might need to be changed.
So a lot of federal taxes do go back to our localities through grants or through like the community project funding that I talked about, the $15 million that went back into localities for specific projects. That's funded through federal taxes. And so some of it does go back. I think my biggest frustration with the tax system is, and here in Virginia, I can't speak to every other state, but here in Virginia, the only source of revenue we authorize localities to use is property taxes. Okay. That bakes inequity into the system because you can have, like, Chesterfield County has a much larger tax base than Charles City County. And so, for argument's sake,
Yes.
it's, Chesterfield County has more money to use to build schools or renovate a school than Charles City County does. And so that right there creates an unlevel playing field among localities so that the quality of school you go to depends on what zip code you live in. I think, but the state can do income taxes. The federal government does income taxes. I think allowing localities to offset and say, rather than doing a property tax or rely solely on property tax, we're going to do a mix of maybe a 1% income tax or 1% sales tax. I think the more tools you have in your toolbox, the easier it is for you to say, we're going to have a tax system that is least burdensome to our citizens or our residents and our businesses, but allows us to meet their needs. And we don't give our local governments the ability to do that. And as a result, they can't pay for everything that they need. So then they have to come to the state or the federal government and say, we need more money from you. The federal government tax structure is complicated. Is way too complicated. I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out. And I've been 2 years now, and I'm a lawyer. So I took a tax class. But I think the tax structure should be more progressive with a small p, where you're not having, you've got people at the upper end of the income that pay so much less of a proportion of their income in taxes than people at the lower end of the spectrum who pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. And that doesn't make sense to me. So I think we've got to look at the tax code in a way that is much more proportionate. And we've got to make sure we're letting our localities have more variety in the taxes that they use so that they're not solely dependent on property taxes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you explained it that way, because when it comes to taxes too, like, I'm pretty complicated. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have like TurboTax or whatever, because I could not figure it out. And it is complicated. And I appreciate you trying to dumb it down for me.
It's not easy, but I mean, the bottom line is that the tax system needs to be fair, and people who can pay more should pay their fair share. The way the system is set up now, though, is you have the people who are billionaires paying proportionately less than middle and low income people, and it's just not fair. I mean, everybody should pay their fair share, recognizing that money is coming back into our communities to provide services that everybody needs and everybody frankly wants.
Speaking about
sorry, real quick, Will, didn't Jeff Bezos, he was able to take the child tax credit, or it was something like he got
well, that's
he made on his federal taxes, like I think he made less than I did or something like that. And I'm like, or I pay more taxes than Jeff Bezos. I want in some way. I remember thinking like, there is something up with that, dude. That doesn't seem right to me.
I agree.
Yeah. So, speaking about government providing services, the infrastructure bill seems like it's had quite the impact on America, and has benefited folks quite a bit, despite no support from Republicans voting on it.
They'll show up to the ribbon cutting though.
Yeah, to the groundbreaking ceremonies.
Oh yeah.
Like, how has the infrastructure bill affected folks in your district?
Oh, tremendously. I mean, everything from, it's the largest investment in sort of clean energy, clean transportation. So everything from buying school buses that are electric and not pumping diesel fumes in the air, to creating new jobs. Here in Richmond, When I-95 was built, it cut Jackson Ward right in half and virtually destroyed that community. Now, through the Infrastructure Act, they're funding a study feasibility study to reconnect Jackson Ward to the rest of the city through a bridge that would go over the highway. So, whether it's, transportation infrastructure, water infrastructure improvements that are critically important to help people drink clean water. It's been a game changer, really. It's been one of the most consequential bills ever passed in American history. But it's, most people don't think infrastructure is very exciting, but we sure do need it. I mean, bridges, there's Mayo Bridge here in the city of Richmond.
Oh my word.
That is in terrible shape, is now being repaired, or new bridge is going to go across the river because of the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, that's great. Just to change the topic just a little bit, kind of as we are winding down. So there's an election coming up for a lot of different people, yourself included. How are you feeling coming up on this next election? You've had a pretty productive first year in Congress, I'd say. So yeah, how are you feeling about your chances of being reelected?
I feel pretty good. I do have an opponent. He does not live in the district. I don't think he's ever lived in the district. I was born.
And I did invite him to come on our show, by the way, just
Okay.
FYI.
Well, I was born and raised here, raising my family here, and have represented a big chunk of the district for, over 18 years as a state legislature. So I know this district, I know these communities, what they need, and I'm working to address those needs. So I feel pretty good. I am also cautiously optimistic that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will win. Tim Kaine will be reelected. You hear every year in Virginia that this is the most consequential election of our lives. I think this really is. Yeah. I think this one will determine whether our democracy survives. I think this one is really an inflection point of, are we going to choose a new way forward where we focus on meeting the needs of everyone, where we build an economy that leaves no one behind? Or are we going to go back to the, Trump years of chaos, division, and hatred? And I think, I'm on the Harris Walz Advisory Council. I've been traveling all across the country. And the most poignant moment to me on the campaign trail was in Milwaukee. We were doing a roundtable on healthcare costs and how the Affordable Care Act has helped. Between that and I can't remember if it was the Inflation Reduction Act that capped insulin at $35 per person for seniors, that capped out-of-pocket expenses. So we're doing a roundtable on that. At the end of the roundtable, I asked everybody, what are you most looking forward to in a Harris Walz administration, expecting them to talk about healthcare costs? Everybody answered something to the effect of, I just want civility in politics again. I just want government to focus on bringing people together. I just want normalcy. People are really tired of the politics of division and hatred and pitting one group against each other, and the negativity that we have seen in the 9 years since Donald Trump first came down that escalator. And I hear that everywhere. I see it everywhere. And I think that's why there was such a huge groundswell of support when Kamala Harris became our candidate. Is there's a joy that I haven't seen in politics since I was a kid. And I think people are just looking forward to, I want government to be boring again. I want government to just focus on bringing people together rather than tearing people apart. And I feel that. I feel that every day. And that's what I'm hopeful to see come January 20th, January 20th, 2025.
I gotcha. Yeah. And one last question is, and this is I think an important one for a lot of people is, so you were Virginia's first Black woman congressperson. If Kamala Harris gets elected, she will be this country's first woman, well, not only first woman president, but first Black woman president. Like, talk to me about like what that would mean just for you and your ancestry. I know what it would mean for me as a Black man in America, who had a dad who was born in 1928, not too far from the Tulsa massacre. And I know it would mean a ton to me, but as a Black woman, like what would that mean?
I mean, representation really matters. And I think about my mom passed away this year at 91. She was born on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, the third youngest of 14 children, and yet she was the first member of her family to go to high school. Because in her town, there were no options for Black women other than an 8th grade education and then becoming a domestic and taking care of somebody else's family. And so to think, not only did she live to see her daughter become a member of Congress, but that she saw Kamala Harris become vice president, and then to know that my daughter, and I get choked up saying this, to know that my daughter will see Kamala Harris become the leader of the, greatest country in the world. She will be able to say, if I dream it, I can achieve it in a way. I was told as a child, you can be anything you want to be, but you got to work twice as hard as anybody else to do it because you got to overcome sexism and racism. To see Kamala Harris shatter that glass ceiling, I will be able to look at my daughter and say, you may face sexism and racism, but because she shattered that ceiling, it's going to be much easier for you. And you can be whatever you want without having to work twice as hard, because that road has been paved for you. That's what that means to me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
What are you most hopeful about for the future of our country? We have this election. As we move on from this election, what are you most hopeful about as we're moving into the future?
Just that people haven't given up. It is always darkest before the dawn, and we are in a pretty dark time as a country right now, and we have been, really since 2016, maybe 2015 with that whole campaign. But people haven't given up on this country, and when I see, anytime you have Dick Cheney and AOC coming together to do what they think is in the best interest of this country, I think the idea of a government by, of, and for the people is stronger than the people that are trying to tear us apart. And I am hopeful that this election will prove that, and that we will come through this dark time, just as we have every other dark time. We will come through this dark time stronger because we're coming together. And that's what I'm most hopeful for.
Man, that's great. Really, really well said. How can people get in connection with what you guys are doing and find out more information about your campaign and
So
all
on
that?
the official side, my website is mcclellan.house.gov, and you can find all the ways to reach my office or me if you have an issue with a state agency, a federal agency, or you want to know more about what we're doing legislatively. You go there, and on social, you find me at Rep McClellan, R-E-P McClellan. On the campaign side, it's jennifermcclellan.com, and on all the socials, I'm Jen with 2 N's, McClellan, VA.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Representative McClellan. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show
Thank
with us
you.
today.
It's a pleasure for me too.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners and followers and viewers, make sure you go check out the website, see what's going on with the campaign and what Representative McClellan has been doing in the 4th District and her plans for the future. Definitely want to encourage you to go check that out. We'll have appropriate links in the show notes. Make sure you like and subscribe, share this with other people, because people need to hear this content. We're trying to do something different, have a different kind of conversation going on. So make sure that you do that. And until next time, keep your conversations not right or left, but up. Thanks, guys, and God bless.